we get hundreds of new legendary cards every single year, and this means the pool of possible commanders is constantly growing. Everyone has their own preferences when it comes to picking a commander, but as I was scanning through the hundreds of commander cards that came out over the past year or so, I found one that stood out to me the most. Alania, Divergent Storm. So I may be a little late to the game here as I took a bit of a break from Magic the Gathering during Bloomborough, but this card has to be one of my favorite commanders they've ever printed in recent sets. In fact, I love this commander so much that I built not just one, but 3 different commander decks which each utilize Alania's ability to win in different ways. But what does this card do? Alania, Divergent Storm costs 3 generic mana, a red and a blue, for a 3/5 Otter Wizard with the ability to copy the first instant, sorcery, and Otter spell you cast each turn at the small price of gifting one of your opponents a card. This ability allows us to take advantage of high mana value red and blue spells and outvalue the board as we draw a ton of cards and cast and copy multiple spells in a turn cycle. Before I talk about each of these 3 decks individually, I wanted to go over some cards that are so good with Alania, they will show up in almost all of the lists. The cool thing to note about cards that have additional costs is that once we pay them for the original, we won't have to pay them again for the copy. This can supercharge some otherwise lackluster spells. Big Score and Unexpected Windfall are already decent draw spells, but doubling up on the treasures and cards makes these especially powerful since we only have to discard once, netting us 3 cards each. That's why every draw package with Alania will utilize these cards like Unexpected Windfall, Big Score, and Pirate's Pillage, which will act as the draw and ramp spells in the deck. They are also quite flexible. Casting these on turn 4 allows you to find cards that you want to copy with your commander while ramping you into having 7 mana on turn 5, allowing you to cast other spells after you've cast Alania, or being cast on turn 6 or 7 to generate tons of mana and draw by copying these spells with Alania. Additionally, because Pirate's Pillage is a sorcery, if you are desperately in need of cards, you can cast Pirate's Pillage on turn 6, copying it with Alania to draw 4 cards and make 4 treasure tokens. Then, use those 4 treasure tokens to cast Big Score, which you can copy again with Alania because it'll be the first instant you cast that turn. At this point, you can choose to cast and copy any Otter spell, or pass with 6 mana and a ton of new cards to cast throughout the turn cycle, or on your next turn. Furthermore, Frantic Search is insanely powerful in this deck. It allows you to loot and throw away the cards only after you've seen all of them, unlike any of the red looting spells previously mentioned. And when you copy the spell with Alania, it basically becomes a free dark ritual because you can cast it by tapping 3 lands, copy it, then untap 6 lands, netting you 3 mana. While this won't technically net you cards, it acts as strong card filtering and weirdly a really powerful ramp spell. Similarly, Demand Answers is strong for the same reasons previously mentioned. With the additional costs already paid, we will net 3 cards off of copying this spell. This theme of using additional costs to gain a benefit, then copying the powered up spell for even more value, will be seen throughout all 3 versions of the decks that I've built for this commander. Cards like Seething Song and Mana Geyser are powerful rituals that can quickly convert us into a winning turn by copying them and storming off. These rituals are used as ramp spells throughout all of the decks. One card that I put in each of these decks is Harmonic Prodigy. A lot of Otters are already wizards, which can help a ton, but getting a 3rd copy of a spell on the stack with Alania is absolutely insane, and sends each of these decks over the edge, oftentimes storming off for a win once this card is in play. Lastly, removal spells like Pongnify and Rapid Hybridization, which already feel strong at 1 mana, will now 2 for 1 our opponents. Flame of Anor is one of my personal favorites in this deck. It's super flexible and can draw us a ton of cards and acts as removal for artifacts and creatures, especially if it's copied, which can turn this into a 10 damage bolt, dealing with almost anything on the board. Not to mention the synergy of choosing another effect if we control a wizard. Notably, this is on cast, meaning it will be super hard for our opponents to stop us from gaining these added effects. One thing to take note of is that when copying modal spells, we won't be able to change the modes, and the modes of the copy will stay the same as the original. Similar to Frantic Search, Snap at worst can be a free bounce spell, and at best can net us 2 mana by untapping 4 lands total if it's copied with Alania. Another small but sometimes relevant thing to note is that using bounce lands like Is It Boilerworks and Guildless Commons will net us even more mana off of these untap effects, since they still only count as 1 land. We'll make sure to take advantage of synergies like this, as these decks are quite mana hungry. These aren't all of the spells that will show up across all 3 decks, but I think they give you an idea of which cards act as staples in any Alania deck. Now, onto the individual deck techs. The first 2 are built without game changers and use Alania's ability in more of a unique way to offer some diversity, whereas the last deck, the most powerful in my opinion, is a bracket 3 deck utilizing best in-slot cards for Alania. So let's get into it with the first and arguably weakest of the deck techs for Alania, Clone and Burn. As the name entails, the whole goal of this deck is to build up a board state of creatures that offer effects like Firebrand Archer, then copy these effects using clone spells on instants or sorceries that can be copied with Alania. Coruscation Mage is a standout among the burn effects, as we can pay the offspring cost into it and then copy it with Alania because it's an otter, causing us to have 4 copies of the Coruscation Mage on the battlefield. Backed up by a very aggressive draw suite, this deck will constantly have gas to copy your burn creatures while slowly draining the table, pushing the game into a grindy state where players will be low on life. The main win con in this deck is building up a critical mass of ping effects, then burning out the table. This is done easiest through casting a Rite of Replication and paying for the kicker to put a ton of copies of a creature like Gutter Snipe into play. From there, you'll only need to cast 4 spells to burn your opponents out of the game. Unless, of course, you copy Rite of Replication with Alania, in which case you'll only need to cast 2 spells. The biggest weakness of this deck is its lack of full board protection and being severely slowed down by board wipes. This deck is at its best when it goes wide and builds quickly. Anything slowing that down can be detrimental to the game plan of this deck. The second Alania deck I built is combat focused, with the idea of using creatures, particularly otters, with prowess, and doubling up on buff spells with Alania's ability to quickly grind our opponents down. Cards like Tempest Angler, Stormcatch Mentor, Frolicking Familiar, Kitsa, and Balmor all buff themselves up upon the cast of an instant or sorcery. Plus, most of these can be copied by Alania to generate a board state of multiple large threats. Bria and Veyron will buff up our entire board while offering additional utility, like allowing our creatures to get in with Bria's last ability or doubling up on our Alania triggers with Veyron. Our buff spells like Monstrous Rage, Run Amok, Titan Strength, and many others within the deck buff up at least one of our creatures, which will hopefully already be bigger thanks to its prowess or other effects. Many of these buff spells also offer the support for the deck. Dreadmaw's Ire, for example, offers artifact removal, and Fist of Flames can offer card draw. This deck looks to close out the game by casting and copying 1 or 2 of the multiple extra combat spells in the deck. Namely, Full Throttle is the most impressive of these extra combat spells. Casting it and copying it with Alania on turn 5 or 6 or 7 will result in 4 extra combats. Through 5 combats and some hopefully huge otters, we should be able to close the game out from there. Now, onto my personal favorite, and what I think is the strongest way to build this deck. This is the personal deck list I use in paper, and it is everything I ever wanted out of an Is It deck. The third and final deck list focuses on ramping hard until we can win the game with a huge X spell such as Crackle with Power. Personally, I've been looking for a deck where I can use Crackle with Power, as is one of my favorite cards, and this deck is perfect. With over 20 pieces of draw and 20 pieces of ramp, this deck is built to churn through as many cards a turn as possible while digging for the win cons. The deck looks to win by casting one of the 3 large burn spells we have: Crackle with Power, Jaya's Immolating Inferno, or Electro Dominance, after generating a ton of mana off of copying our multiple ritual spells. I think that this deck takes advantage of Alania's ability in the best way, playing control while drawing or tutoring our way to game-winning combo. Speaking of tutors, I've chosen to include Gifts Ungiven as one of the 3 game changers in this deck. This recently unbanned card can convert into a win pretty easily without needing to be copied. The best pile I've been able to come up with is Seething Song, Mana Geyser, Past in Flames, and Crackle with Power. You can copy Gifts Ungiven if you have Alania out to grab a similar pile like Jessica's Will, Brass's Bounty, and our other 2 big burn spells. From there, the line is somewhat easy to envision. Even if you don't have the mana you need to do it yet, you'll have the cards you need set up for next turn. Overall, this game plan is explosive yet consistent, using heavy ramp spells to get Alania into play, which allows us to double up on our draw and tutor spells, often winning a few turns after Alania comes down. If you want to expand or change the list, you could cut some card draw for more free protection. Alania is a big target, so cards like Deflecting Swat and Fierce Guardianship are great considerations, but didn't make it into my final list. The ways to build this commander are endless, and Alania is by far my favorite new commander. If you're not satisfied with the 3 decks I provided, then you can totally find other things that fit your playstyle. In Is It Tempo deck, where you play counter spells and bounce spells, copying them to get maximum value until you push for a win could be fun. And if you want to get gross, jamming every single extra turn spell in a deck is an evil place to take this commander. Expropriate. Leave your comments below on if you found this commander as cool as I did, or if you would build it in a different way than I mentioned. Is there another commander that was released in the past year that you feel passionate about? Let me know. I'm always on the lookout for interesting commanders that provide many angles to build from. The best way to support us is by leaving a like and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to check out the Patreon. And if you haven't already, watch our last video where we suggest some less popular commanders to replace the top 100 on the EDH rec list. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.